And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Traveling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
Orange 25! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. What is it? Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good middle of the day for once, everyone, and welcome to NSF's live stream of the Starlink Group 7-14 mission. I see all of your 5x5s in chat. Thank you very much for that. And we are here live to bring you views of SpaceX launching another 22 satellites, but this time from Florida. I'll be your host for today's mission. I'm Trevor, and with me is a very competent co-host, Adrian. Adrian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, although I want to correct quickly that this launches from California. But yeah, looking good. 35 minutes to go, as far as we know. Looking like they might target the opening of the window. We'll see, get confirmation of that in 2 or 3 minutes or so. But very unlikely for Vandenberg here, we see a rocket. There it is, in the middle of your screen.
Did I seriously said Florida? I was literally thinking, like, for once it's not Florida, it's
Nope.
California.
You said Florida.
Yes, California, not Florida. Anyway, bringing us these awesome live views is Jack Beyer. We will try to get him on commentary later, but he's working a few signal problems out there with his audio for now. Anyway, if you guys have any questions in chat, as always, make sure you tag us at NASA Spaceflight in chat, and your question will enter our queue. And we'll hopefully ask it. But with that, Adrian, can you go over some of the cool things on today's launch?
Absolutely, and the main thing that is cool, I think, about this is the fact that we are talking about the 300th launch of a Falcon 9 with this one, which is the special occasion why we wanted to for sure show you all of this. Of course, we are talking about the Starlink Group 7-14 mission, which, as Trevor mentioned in the intro, will bring up 22 more Starlink V2 mini satellites to low Earth orbit. Right now, the about 4.5 hour long window will open in 35 minutes from now, so they will basically target the opening here. And we are looking at B1082, which, quite unusual for a Falcon 9, is still in the single digits, even in the low single digits, with just 2 flights so far. One flight so far. This will be its second flight. It launched the Starlink Group 7-9 mission before, and now it will launch Starlink Group 7-14. So that's that. And also, I believe this will be the 200 consecutive landing if SpaceX managed to land today for that manifest. So they're kind of going forward 2 very big milestones here. The landing of this mission will be on, of course, I Still Love You, stationed in the Pacific Ocean right now.
Yeah, and I see a little bit of conversation in chat about the 300 number, and there are kind of 3 numbers that are often cited that I think it's worth going into. So because of AMO 6 and in-flight abort, there's a little bit of weirdness. So in-flight abort was not an orbital mission since they were not targeting orbit, and then AMO 6 obviously never launched. So this is the 301st Falcon 9 mission, since both of those counts as missions, but AMO 6 doesn't count as a launch. So therefore, it's the 300 launch and 299th orbital launch. So a little bit of, depending on how you look at it, could be a slightly different number. But yeah, let's get to some of your guys' questions. So, Adrian, Alan is asking, do you have any views of Slick 6 development? And while we can't bring any views of it, I guess, has there been much development of Slick 6?
So it has not been forever since Slick 6 was still used, right, for Delta IV Heavy with the last launch in September 2022. I believe there already has been undergoing some work there. We, if I recall correctly, have seen some SpaceX logos there and some stuff going on there. But the planned launch date, if I recall correctly, is probably 2025 from 6.6. So we are about a year or so away before we will see launches from Slick 6 here at the West Coast. So there's probably still some stuff there to go. But unfortunately, we don't have like a good live view where we constantly can peek in and see what they are doing there. But the SpaceX for sure is already working on the infrastructure there because Delta IV Heavy is kind of a very different rocket to Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. So you probably have to reconfigure that setup quite a lot.
Yeah, and we've heard that SpaceX's timeline is fairly aggressive. I believe they want to have have it ready for Falcon launches within around 2 years. And Alex is pointing out in the back channel, if you look very closely, frost is visible on the rocket now, which is a very good sign that they are into propellant loading ahead of today's mission.
Also, you can see, I love that always with Vandenberg here. You can see how the tank farm is ongoing on the right. Like that's it feels like a weird, different thing here with Vandy in terms of visibility. Of course, that happens with other Falcon 9 launches as well, but it's like extra visible here. So I love that as well. So yeah, we are locked into a T0 then if that's propellant loading. And yes, I also see condensation on the rocket. So yes, they're in prop loading.
Very good sign. But speaking of the tank farm, Adrian, James is wondering, what are the 3 towers to the right of the rocket that are smoking at the bottom? I think those 3 large vertical tanks.
That's like they're for sure related to propellant loading. I have to actually pass on if they are LOX or RP1 related. That's like I don't have like a good overview of this tank farm as we have with Boca. But that's probably related to either or. The question is just what it either is one of these 2 commodities involved in any shape or form, or nitrogen might be used to assist in the chill down process. So there you go. But I don't we don't have like this labeling for every single tank like we have in Boca here.
Yeah, but it is important to note the wording that you use, they are not smoking. They're not on fire, anything like that. That is just condensation that is coming off of the tanks because the propellant is several hundred degrees below zero. So it's very cold, and that causes all the condensation that you see. And this is completely nominal.
Yep, and also Alex assisting in the background, but like the large things to the right might not even be tanks. These could be vaporizers, based on pictures we see close up for. So that's also another thing. And of course, there's also this difference between venting and condensation, what we always have, where venting is actually where a tank is open and you vent out something. And then there's condensation, which, as you just pointed out, just builds based on cold surfaces. And there's not actually something releasing into the atmosphere.
Yeah, good note. So for those who may not know, since you are the Boca tank farm expert himself, what are the vaporizers for, and is it basically the same thing that we see in Boca Chica?
Yeah, basically they are assist in a chill down. The problem in all of this rocket cryogenic rockets, and there's the picture by the way, is you need to get your commodities to certain temperatures. Well, how do you achieve certain temperatures? You chill them down. You use liquid nitrogen for that, and you need use heat exchangers for that. And you basically try to get your propellants, and in this case, probably the most critical one is liquid oxygen, into this very cold cryogenic state. So that's what they are doing here. And the chill down for Falcon 9 actually starts also way before we see propellant loading. Like it's kind of like with Starship, where the tank farm will already start to work hours before the Falcon 9 itself. Before the Falcon 9 itself is propelled. So the tank farm is kind of doing the heavy job here in terms of propellants. And yes, the vaporizers assisting chill down. So there you go.
Yeah, and right, the liquid oxygen on Falcon 9 is thought to be stored at roughly negative 210 degrees centigrade, which is about negative 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's a lot of chilling that they have to do. And keep in mind that that's a decent bit cooler than on most other rockets, and SpaceX does decide to further cool the propellant down below the boiling point to help increase density of the propellant, which then increases performance of the vehicle and just the amount of propellant you can have on board. And that's something that SpaceX first started experimenting with Falcon 9 V1.2. And, I wasn't around back then, but from what I hear, they used to scrub a lot because of how hard it was at first.
I mean, if you think about it, between melting and boiling point for oxygen, the melting point for liquid oxygen is 218 degrees centigrade, minus, of course, and the boiling point is then minus 182. So you have kind of like this window, right? Because they're using liquid oxygen, and if you go above, well, you're kind of now have gaseous oxygen. If you go below, you get crystals. So that's also not like, usually you don't like to you don't like to push ice blocks through your engines. Most engines do not take that very well. So it's a very complicated step. And of course, that also means you need to arrive at a certain pressure at a certain point, which always results in this discussion and this point we always have where we say Falcon 9 is kind of locked in now. Falcon 9 cannot really wiggle around in its window anymore and just push in half an hour, because it's like a very delicate process that leads them to actually be able to target a certain time in the window. And they cannot just pause and do that again. They would need to detank the rocket and then start the process again, because it's kind of hard to arrive at this point at that single moment in time.
Right. And I guess we should probably add on the asterisk that a lot of these numbers that we're saying for temperature add, say plus or minus 10, plus or minus 15 degrees or something like that on them, because we don't know the exact pressure in the tanks or whatnot, so it's hard to, exactly calculate what the temperature would be. But those numbers should be rough guidelines. Anyway, Adrian, Alex just brought up another interesting record in the back channel that I think only Alex would know. What is this?
Yeah, the record would break the shortest amount of time between 3 consecutive launches of Falcon of SpaceX. The current record is 1 day, 9 hours, 46 minutes, and 30 seconds for SVO2 O3BM power and Starlink Group 4-37. The new record would bring this down by roughly 9 hours to 23 hours, 4 minutes, and 30 seconds for USSF 124, Nova C, and Starlink 7-14. Assuming it launches today. I want to always add that, because then I'm not like to blame when I jinx it. Yeah, that's always the caveat I want to add.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't just jinx it. And this record was going to be even shorter, because this launch had originally been planned for yesterday, in between SpaceX's USSF 124 and Nova C mission. So then there would have been 3 launches within the span of around 8 hours. However, this launch got pushed for reasons we are not aware of, unfortunately. But with that, I want to go through some of your guys' very generous support. As always, thank you everyone for being here, tuning in, clicking the like button, and for those who go above and beyond, we want to thank you even more. Dave became a PadRad member. James D. upgraded to a launch director, one of our highest tiers of support. Doug Bell became a PadRad member, and Kenneth became a Red Team member. Welcome all to our membership program. Hope you guys enjoyed the exclusive perks that we work on. Musical Wolves, a regular on stream, the super chat saying, "What's the most number of flights a single Falcon 9 has had from Vandenberg?" That sounds like an Alex question, but do you know off the top of your head, Adrian?
So there are some cores that are mostly used in Vandenberg. There's that's probably the candidates here because yes, there are some transfers, of course, between coasts, but there's also like cores that are mostly used at one coast. But I would have to this is totally a question where I would open Wikipedia and look up because that's not a number I have in my head. I totally admit that.
Well, Alex has it in his head. It is 16 flights on B1063.
Wow.
So.
That's quite a lot. Yeah, so quite a lot to do for B1082 here with just performing today its second flight, hopefully. Again, it's kind of a baby for Falcon 9. Like, we are usually used now to these 14 to 18 flight boosters at this point, and seeing one that just performs its second flight, it's kind of interesting. And also kind of interesting that SpaceX doesn't care to use these early flights anymore to perform very high profile missions. They use the early flights of B1082 just to do Starlinks. There's no hesitation to just use that for that.
Alex, by the way, is correcting himself. It's 15 flights, not 16. Sorry about that minor error. But to Adrian's point, we even saw last night Nova C was a NASA mission that launched on an 18th flight, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. I do not think so. I think there's two arguments here. We have seen, for example, from Dr. Zurbruggen earlier, a year ago or so, and also from others at this point, statements about is it even better to have a low flight booster, or do you want a booster that already has some flights where it works, it was tested, Is it even good to have, when you have a very expensive payload, on what flight would you put yourself on a Falcon 9? Probably not, record-breaking, maybe? But again, there was Nova C. So it's kind of... Yeah. It's really an interesting development when you think about 3-4 years ago. Nobody would ever thought that a high-profile mission would fly on an 18th reflight of a booster. Or an 18th flight.
But as you can see on your screen, sorry to interrupt you, Adrian, we are at the T-minus 20 minute and 20 second vent. So despite the minor differences on the TE at Vandenberg, this is the same vent that we're used to at the Cape. So Adrian, what is this vent?
Yeah, of course. Not only is it one of our favorite events, it's also the wrapping up of RP1 loading onto the second stage. And they basically now wrap that up and purge the lines in preparation to load liquid oxygen onto the second stage. So that's what's happening now. So it's kind of like changing the kind of the vent, or the way the thing flows. And in 3 minutes from now, the stage 2 LOX load will begin, which will as you can see on this beautiful timer on the left there.
Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to go back to the conversation we were just having. I think I would fly on if I had a really expensive payload, I think I would fly on any Falcon 9 booster, to be honest. I mean, Falcon 9 Block 5 has not really even had any problems on ascent. There were the two boosters a long time ago that had engine shutdowns, but aside from that, it's had an extraordinarily clean record.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick, if somebody would tell me, hey, you have to pick, I would probably pick something in the 5 to 10 flight range. Flight proven, but not completely in the upper edge, somewhere in there. That would just be my gut feeling.
Yeah, understandable. I've seen a lot of gifted memberships, so thank you all for doing that. Billy Day gifted 5 Red Team memberships. And then Coco gifted another Red Team membership. So if you got one of those, make sure you thank whoever gifted it to you. And, hope you enjoy the perks. Jack with the store message saying, what do you think will happen first? NSF reaching 1 million subs or OFT3 launching? Oh boy.
I think it will be OFT free launching. Like, well, we are getting there, so that's really really cool. But I think OFT free will probably launch first. But I think based on current pacing and timing, something would have to go seriously wrong with Starship for that not to be first. But still cool to see this number like grow and so many people enjoying what we do. So thank you all for that.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy that we're so close to such a huge milestone. It's kind of unreal to
Chris.
think about how many people 1 million is.
Yeah, Chris says in the chat, Alex needs his hair for that launch.
Here's another question from Musical Wolves asking, why do Vandenberg launches scrub more often? Do they, and do we have any good indication of why that may be, Adrian?
So I'm not sure if I'm not even sure if they do. I think lately a lot of scrubs we have seen with Falcon 9s are mostly weather related from what we can tell, or the good old additional checkouts, which is like this ominous description where we don't get the real reason why they scrubbed. And it's like, hey, we are standing down for additional checkouts. It's like, okay, what are you doing? But I wouldn't say it's necessarily more. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's more. If it's more, it's maybe down to the fact that this pad is maybe a bit less used than, for example, LC Slick 40. That could be it, but I would have to see the statistics here. I don't want to go on a limb and say, oh, it's for sure that.
Yeah. I also imagine that since Vandenberg had a fairly long pause in launches, that they probably kind of just had a smaller team during that. So I wouldn't be surprised if now when they're suddenly really trying to ramp up cadence from the West Coast, that they're suddenly needing to onboard a bunch of new people. And obviously those new people would need to be trained. So that's just total speculation on my part, but it could make sense.
Yep, and also we are now into second stage logs loading, by the way, just to note that.
So yeah, Slick 4 East this year has been doing pretty good in terms of turnarounds. It's had its quickest turnaround ever at 5 days, 5 hours, and 22 minutes. And now the average turnaround of the pad seems to be around 10 days, as opposed to last year it was more around 2 weeks. So that's a non-trivial improvements already in 2023. Or 2024, sorry.
It's like the beginning of the calendar year, like we always had in school. I don't know if that's an American thing, but in Germany you have to write the current date, and like when you're in school on the top right of the paper sheet all the time. And I always would put the wrong year for there, like until March.
Yep.
Then would change. Yep.
I still do that. I was going through my spreadsheets the other day, and when I ran across a negative 15-day turnaround time, I realized that the date I had entered was probably in the wrong year.
Yep, that certainly happens. I always love when spreadsheets does that, or when you put in numbers and suddenly you have like a date instead of like a number. It's the best when spreadsheet decides, oh, I convert this for you, and they're like, don't convert this for me.
Yeah, and Danny in our back channel is pointing out as well, the weather this winter has been pretty brutal on both coasts. So that's also caused quite a few delays to SpaceX's launches, so they haven't been able to hit quite the cadence I think they want to be able to hit.
Yeah, and to be fair, they're still they're still on a very impressive cadence here. And of course, you get like if you try more, you have a higher chance at some point to run into more weather issues, because well they launch so much, so there's a lot of days where they probably hit bad weather, and they still are fairly on time versus some other launchers. So there you go.
Yeah, I do think it's funny that we're saying somewhat slow cadence when this will be their 15th launch of 2024. So they did 10 in January, and then this will be the 5th of this month. So they'll probably get up to like 9 or so this month, and then hopefully they'll be able to catch up in March and the rest of the year. But still a remarkable team that they have.
Yeah, so far they only launched about 15% of the 50% of the world's orbital launches this year. So it's like what a slow start.
Yeah. Going through some more of your guys' support. Hyrule with the $2 super chat. Thank you for that. Jared with a super chat saying, lock slushy. I don't know if I'd recommend drinking it. Bideford gifted 5 Red Team memberships, and then Apocalypse Cow gifted 5 Red Team memberships. Joseph with the store message saying West Coast, best coast. I'm sure Jack is happy to hear that. And let's see, they got the launch, entry, and landing shirt and the... Come on. Okay, the other one. Oh, there we go. The test flight 3 patch.
It's amazing.
And Nina with the story message saying, go, go, go for launch successfully. We all hope that, getting also the launch entry and landing shirt. And then Merry Old Elf gifted a single Red Team membership. So I guess the launch entry and landing t-shirt segues us nicely, Adrian, to what will the ascent profile look like today?
Well, it's we will as in like how like a lot of stuff like burns. We will have. Oh, there we go. Okay, I was not sure if we like talking about timeline or profile in terms of trajectory. There you can see the trajectory. So there's the trajectory. That's the easy part here because we can always show that picture and then we have a good view of how that looks. We will have about 2 minute and 31 second flight of the first stage before the second stage takes over, and that will then burn until the 8 minute and 44 seconds mark, and burn for a second time after 53 minutes. So there's the first and second stage re-entry zones we can see here. It's am I allowed to say standard Starlink out of Vandenberg? Is that allowed? Are we allowed to say that? I still kind of refuse that saying sometimes because we are still talking about a giant rocket launching internet satellites on a regular basis and landing on a ship. Like, I don't think that can ever be regular.
Yeah. I remember when I was first getting into this, Elon was saying that their goal will have been successful when landings become boring. And I don't think they're there yet, but also it's not the same like, ooh, will it land? Let's pay attention like it used to be.
Yeah,
and
it's like, it feels weird, but like landing is not boring. I still get excited every time we see a touchdown from Falcon 9.
Yeah. Especially when, as we were mentioning earlier, this will be the 274th booster landing and 200th consecutive booster landing. I believe the last landing failure was on Starlink group. It wasn't even group at that point. It was...
Yeah, it was the first generation, right?
Yeah.
Version
Starlink,
1 launched 19.
Yeah, V1.0 L19. For some reason I was thinking L22. So then was like, I should go check my spreadsheet to make sure I say that right. But yeah, Starlink 19, which launched on February 16th, 2021. So ironically, 3 years ago from tomorrow.
Let's hope that doesn't like have any influence on today.
Yeah,
that would be very preferable. But like overall, also Alex pointing out, which a fact I really like, and I wonder why that happening is the previous Group 7 launches had a 640 kilometer downrange drone ship. This one is 32 kilometers closer. So my thinking is this might be down to some mass reduction in the payload, possibly, because like there's two things what could happen here. Either you burn the booster shorter, or you have like there's different how you come to that point, but there has to be some change why you suddenly have to do 32 kilometers less downrange, right?
I
like,
suspect it's probably trajectory changes. Right, we've seen SpaceX make really minor adjustments to the ascent profile on these Starlink missions, which has allowed them to significantly increase the payload that they can launch on Falcon 9. So I wouldn't be too surprised if it was maybe flying a bit shallower, which allowed them to, not have as long to coast down range. So that's why it would be a bit closer. Or it could be, something more minor than that. We'll have to. Well, hopefully Alex will analyze the trajectory and get us an answer of where it comes from. Anyway,
absolutely. 7 minutes to go. We are entering engine chill very soon.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess it's probably worth going over, Adrian. What are the events that we're expecting from now up until liftoff of the vehicle?
So right now the Falcon 9 is already starting to engine chill, which means it preconditions everything related to the engines for the flow of cold propellants. So that's going on there. You can see the timeline. Then, of course, next is the retraction of the strong bag. The strong bag gives the rocket stability right now. And in about 2 minutes from now, it will open its clamps and then slightly retract first before it will, of course, completely retract very close to launch, actually during launch. And then we have wrapping up of both the second and first stage LOX loading very, very shortly before launch. And then 1 minute before launch, Falcon 9 will enter startup. Startup means basically the Falcon 9 launch computer takes over the countdown. And from there on out, the Falcon 9 is kind of in this autonomous state where it controls itself and basically performs the launch. So it's kind of like a handover to from the mission control to Falcon 9.
Right. And one minor correction there, the Vandy TE does not throw back. It stays there at that same position for launch, unlike the two TEs on the East Coast, which have that throwback style. It's pretty surprising, in my opinion, that SpaceX hasn't decided to switch it out, but I guess, it's good enough. Going back to some of your questions, reminder, if you have any, you can tag us in chat with @NASA Spaceflight, and we will hopefully get to it. I see people asking in chat about Stubby. No, this is not a Stubby mission. So Adrian,
usually Starlinks are not.
Yeah, here's a question from Matrix saying, do they ever trigger that flight termination system on the booster they plan on expending to ensure they are destroyed on reentry?
I would be surprised by that. If they do that, they usually just let them, the thing is, if you don't brake, you kind of hit the atmosphere kind of fast. Basically, it's in a situation where they don't have to do that. As soon as they hit the atmosphere, the booster will not be able to structurally survive, and then, then you're gone. So, what would really an FTS using bring you there? You would just create more pieces and blow them out more. I do not think that's really helpful in that situation. That's the good thing about rockets. If you don't brake, they kind of break up and just go down in the ocean. Especially the first stage, of course, because the first stage is not on any orbital or near orbital trajectory. It's going down about 600, 700, 800 kilometers downrange.
Yeah, one thing that's not exactly what this question is asking, but is worth noting, is the second stage before or after it completes its deorbit burn goes under what's called, I believe it's called a propellant pacification or something along those lines. And that's where they vent all of the COPVs to ensure that there's nothing of high energy that could splash down if it was to survive reentry. So they want all of the bits to, once they splash down, to be not dangerous to anyone or anything that comes close to it. And I believe...
Fun fact, I recently learned that a launch company used the word pacification device for an explosive charge that separates the tanks once the mission is done, which I found hilarious.
I mean, I guess it is pacifying it.
Yeah.
And there you could see in that scene just a second ago that the strong back has retracted to its launch position. So it will stay there for launch, and that is all of the movement done pre-launch already.
Yep, and just 2.5 minutes to go here.
Yeah. And stage 1 LOX load has been completed.
So let's see what here the final steps are. But so far, everything on track for this mission. Weather was reported over 90% go, which usually means, like, unless it very much surprises SpaceX, they are very confident everything will be good to go. So unless something comes up here suddenly in the countdown, this should be another launch in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, real quickly before that, Hal 9000 is asking, is Falcon 9 the most flown rocket ever? If not, what rocket is? It's not. Soyuz, to my knowledge, it kind of depends on how you say it. If you think about like the class of Soyuz, that's way, way more than Falcon 9. But in terms of very specific rocket, it is possible Block 5 is. I'm actually not sure. Anyway, stage 2 LOX load has been completed. Coming up in 25 seconds from now, Falcon 9 will enter what is known as startup. Adrian, what is this process?
Yeah, basically the Falcon 9 launch computer will take over the countdown, and also the rocket itself will basically pressurize their tanks finally for flight. It's kind of like the final checks, the final making sure everything is good to go. The launch computer verifies every system of the rocket is good to go, and once everything checks out, the rocket and the launch director verify go for launch, and then the rocket is go for launch. It's allowed to launch just in hopefully 45 seconds from now. So we should get confirmation from. There you go. Go for launch.
Yep. And that's that official confirmation from the launch director. So now we are coming up on the series of events at T-minus 3 seconds, which is when the booster will issue the command for all 9 Merlin engines to be ignited. So pay attention to the base of the vehicle, and if we're lucky, we may be able to see a green flash. And that green flash will be the T-tab that they use to ignite the engines. And then from that, all 9 engines will ignite. And if they're healthy, the vehicle will lift off in about 5 seconds.
Let's see. I see some deluge. We would see, yes, there's ignition.
There's ignition and liftoff. We have liftoff of SpaceX's 300th Falcon 9 launch, and we will remain quiet so you can hear the audio.
There we go. Rocket already passed max Q.
Yep.
So, looking good so far.
Coming up in just about a minute on a series of events. The first is MECO, main engine cutoff, which is when all 9 of those engines you can see on your screen will shut down. With this view that we have from Jack, it is very possible that we'll see them shut down in the staggered configuration that they do. So pay attention for pairs of engines shut down about 100 milliseconds apart. And with views like this, it's somewhat obvious on days like these. Then after that, the stages will separate using the pneumatic separation system. And then second stage engine will ignite at that point. And at that point, we will have two separate vehicles on their own ways. Stage 2, with the fairing still attached, will continue on its way to orbit, while Stage 1 will begin its process down to the drone ship.
And Jack here still has the rocket, which should perform Miko just about now. There is.
There's Mika.
And there's the beautiful non-stubby nozzle. And there we go.
Awesome. And then on the left, you can see the grid fins deploying on the booster as the engine bell starts to glow orange from heat on the right-hand side.
Should also point out, because that's the difference between, for example, the RTLS launches we have seen in the last few days a bit more, that this booster right now will not perform a boost back burn. That's just for some of these missions. For this, it will just perform 2 burns, and re-entry burn and a landing burn. And there's the firing gun for the Starlinks.
And both of those fairing halves will be attempting recovery, I should say, both of those fairing halves, by Go Beyond, which I believe is stationed approximately 650 kilometers downrange. And Go Beyond is basically what the two drone ship Bob and Doug, the two support vehicles on the East Coast are, where they can serve both as ASTS support and also fairing recovery.
Yep, they really try to reuse as much as they can here to reduce costs, which of course makes a lot of sense if you launch so much here.
Yeah, I believe in the all hands meeting that Elon had a few, I guess weeks ago at this point, he was saying that each time they reuse and recover a fairing, they save $6 million. So $6 million times, 100 and whatever launches a year is, over $500 million, which is pretty crazy.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we are just about 1.5 minutes away here from the first stage entry burn, where the first stage you can see on the left here will try to slow itself down in preparation to hit the atmosphere, because if you do that too fast, that's not really great for your structural integrity of your booster.
Yeah, and the entry burn today is expected to start at T plus 6 minutes and 10 seconds and last for 21 seconds or so. It's worth noting here that the entry burn is not done based on time. It's based on data points the vehicle is receiving. So it's pretty common for the entry burn to be shorter than what SpaceX has on their website. And that's not, there's no problem if that is the case. And this engine, or this burn, as you could see on our launch, entry, and landing merch, will be done with 3 engines. So there will be the center E9 engine, which will ignite first, followed shortly after by 2 of the outer engines, E1 and E5. And then they will all shut down, while for the stage to coast for another around 1.5 minutes before the landing burn will begin.
And it really makes sense that they have such a ability to adjust a lot of things here in the re-entry profile, based on telemetry. And where we go. There's the entry burn. There's the switch to 3 engines. Because there's so many factors you don't control, right? Wind, there's so many factors here. They have to just adjust to, and that's what they do here. With this entry burn and then later the landing burn, where they just have to react to the position they are right now. They cannot just pre-code this and just execute a maneuver. That wouldn't work.
Yeah. The person behind all of this, Lars Blackmore, published a paper going over some of the control systems that Falcon 9 uses. And at some point, when I have more time, I really would like to go and try to understand more of how this works, but I suspect it'll be beyond me. Anyway, coming up in just about a minute on that landing burn. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, you can see the second stage is performing nominally on its burn to its parking orbit. The second stage will perform 2 burns on today's mission, like most Starlink missions. So the first one will go until T plus 8 minutes and 44 seconds, and then the stage will coast for about 45 minutes before it will perform a single second long burn to circularize the orbit ahead of deploy of those 22 Starlink satellites. And that deployment orbit is 286 by 296 at 53.16 degrees, if my memory serves me correct.
And I believe we can see, yeah, there's the drone ship. You can see, of course, there's the Love You there. As the booster now tries to slow itself down and land on the drone ship. There we go. And we see the landing legs now. There they are. And that looks very centered.
And there's 200 in a row.
Another landing. And that looks very centered. That's one of these center landing flexes we have seen sometimes. So there we go. And the second stage should just get very close right now to wrap up the first burn. So it's kind of following rapidly here. And that's it.
And there we have shutdown of stage 2 and landing of stage 1. And then there's DOS's favorite view, an empty launch pad following the successful start to a launch. For those who may have paid attention yet to yesterday, SpaceX tweeted had a post on X that there were rockets vertical on all 4 of their pads, and now 3 of those are gone, with the only one remaining being Starship, which tomorrow we are expecting some further testing, so make sure you tune into that stream because we'll be live.
Absolutely true. And also we have another NSF Live later tomorrow as well. And there's Twist coming out. So much what we do. So there you go. Some content on Friday. You have some NSF content on Friday if you want to start the weekend with that.
Yeah, NSF Live 7 p.m. Eastern, and Starship testing whenever SpaceX starts, we'll be live. And then Twist. When does Twist come out, Adrian?
Around noon Eastern.
Around noon Eastern.
Give or take. I just saw this. Does Alex really have the distance between launches in comma of days instead of actual he has now there's now a 3-day turnaround he has on record here of 0.961458 days. Interesting, Alex. Interesting. Just saying.
Wow. Yeah.
So
anyway, going over some more of your guys' support that we got during the launch. Matilda with a super chat saying, "Good evening, everyone. Don't forget to click the like button as well while watching." Yeah, thank you for that reminder. It does help the channel out and is free. Ian says, "Congrats to 300 launches, SpaceX. Cheers to many more." It's 300 launches just of Falcon 9. So they still have all of the Falcon Heavy launches, Falcon 1, and then, of course, Starship. John gifted 5 Red Team memberships, and then Deborah with the super chat saying 12,000 watching and less than 2,000 likes. Yeah, thank you everyone for those reminders. Coming up, as I was mentioning before, the second stage will coast for about 42 more minutes before performing the singular second long burn, and then it will coast for another 10 minutes before deploying the Starlink satellites. After that, the second stage will perform that deorbit burn that we talked about at the beginning of the stream to ensure that SpaceX isn't leaving any unnecessary debris in orbit.
And we will have some replays here of the launch. Just to give you that heads up, we will move into a replays here very, very shortly. Working in the background. You can see here how the tank farm is spooling down now that the rocket is gone.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Let's see. Launch Recap is asking 300th or 301st. Next spaceflight says 301st. Adrian, could you just go over again the slight differences between what the 301 number is versus the 300 versus the 299 number?
Yeah, there's two missions here that add a lot of technicality. There's once the in-flight abort, which was a launch but not an orbital mission. So there's one technicality that always changes this number based on if you say, hey, this is the orbital launch, because this would be the 299th orbital launch, but the 300 launch. And then you have the 301st mission, because technically the Amos 6 anomaly was part of a mission, right? So you had a 301st mission, but the 300th launch and the 299th orbital launch, depending on which classification you add.
Yeah. But Alex is pointing out that NOTAMs for Starlink Group 7-15 indicate they're targeting the 20th in the evening or 21st early morning UTC. So the next launch from Vandy is only 5 days away. And also in that time, I believe we have the HTS 113BT mission from the Cape. So SpaceX has a lot more launches to go. But I believe we have some replays.
Let's see here. Hey, you can see with and without rocket. What really cool was in the replay, you could see how the deluge instantly spools up. Watch at the foot of the rocket for that. That's where you will see the deluge going up close to launch, because of course Falcon 9 also has a deluge to prevent pad and rocket damage at the beginning of the launch. Any second here now. There we go, deluge, and now we hear the launch.
And we'll be quiet for this again since the launch audio was so good.
Yep, I enjoyed one more.
Wow, yeah, that audio on today's launch sounds so good.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Like this deep throttling sound, like I don't know, it always gets you, right? How cool is it?
I love what we do. I can't believe that humanity does this. Like,
Yeah, we just did what three Falcon 9 launches, watching 3 Falcon 9 launches in less than an hour. In a day, sorry. So that's kind of cool.
yeah, and Jack pointing out that the audio in person was also amazing, with the mountains reflecting it right at him. So, Jack, thank you for going out there and getting us that. And he wants to say to everyone who's super chatted, he wants me to say thank you for helping him pay for his gas.
I want to really have like a deep study on what determines the difference in a launch audio, because we have seen so many differences. I guess it's like humidity. It's probably like it's a big factor. Wind probably is a factor. So I really would like to have like a deep dive into what really determines like the difference in launch audio while you still be on the same location. Like we really need like an expert. We need to invite like an expert here to just talk with us about why is sound behaving so differently. Temperature, yeah. Like there's so many things here that I would like to explore, and I feel like we need to really contact like somebody that is an audio expert regarding rockets about this. This is just me pitching live.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'm sure clouds, the type of propellant, as you were saying, humidity, just air density in general. This is something that I think we'll need to look more into, so keep an eye out for that. But with that, we'll just go through our last piece of support today from Deborah, saying gas money for Jack. Jack says thank you. But thank you to everyone joining us today. Thank you to Jack for bringing us these live views. Thank you to Jay for operating today's live stream. Adrian, thank you for being on stream.
Thanks for having me. That was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. And then thank you, Alex, as always, for being in the background helping out. Oh, and Ian with the last minute super chat saying, here's some gas money, smiley face. So thank you, Ian. But with that, I've been your host for today's mission, Trevor Sesnick, a writer here at NSF. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow for Starship testing and NSF Live. Have a good one, everyone.
And here we go.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RS-68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.